I have booted up my computer and I'm simply sitting at the Windows desktop. Doesn't matter which version of Windows you have, even though it may look a little bit different, all of these things we're going to do will work the same way. The first thing we know about a mouse is that at its most fundamental, it moves the cursor. If I move my mouse physically from the left and to the right, that moves the cursor left and right as well. What's not always as intuitive is that if you push the mouse away up on the screen, and if you pull it towards you, it moves the cursor down on the screen. If these things aren't very comfortable for you or they aren't very familiar, you can just practice. It's okay to sit there and just move the mouse around. Also realize that there are some settings for the mouse that can make a mouse, say at work a little bit differently than they might at home. It's called sensitivity, and you can adjust how a little movement of your mouse could make it move a big distance on the screen. We'll talk about settings though in the next lesson. Let's move on with some of our basic mousing techniques. One of those is the use of the left and right mouse buttons. On my desktop, and mine happens to be in the upper left corner of the desktop, I can see a folder called Project Files PC Fundamentals. I'm going to move my mouse to the upper left corner by simply pushing it up and to the left, and you'll notice that as I move my mouse over this folder, it highlights. Later operating systems have this feature enabled, so it makes it easier to see where your mouse actually is. At this point, if I left-click with my mouse, I select. Now it had a little bit change of color, but it's easier to see that if I move my mouse completely off of the folder. Even though my mouse is off of the folder, it's still highlighted. That means the folder is selected. One of my favorite sayings on computers, and you'll probably hear me say it several times throughout this course, is, in order to be affected, it must be selected. In other words, in order to do something with this folder, I have to tell the computer that that's what I want it to work with. By left-clicking, I have selected it. Now I also told you that a right-click always brings up a menu, so I'm going to move back over the folder and press my right mouse button one time. The right mouse button always brings up something called a shortcut menu. Actually, it's called a context-sensitive shortcut menu. Context-sensitive means that it depends on what you right-click on as to what options you see. Since I right-clicked on a folder, I can see things that are appropriate for a folder. If I were to right-click on something else, like a word in a document, I would see different options. This is actually good because it means whenever you right-click, you're only going to see things that are appropriate for what you're trying to work with, not everything the computer can do. So left-click selects, right-click shows a menu, and if I want to deselect this menu, I can just move off of it and do a left-click. And you'll see that I both got rid of the menu and I also deselected the folder. One of my favorite techniques that we've discussed though is that drag and drop, and I'm going to show you how to do that here. Drag and drop is usually used to move something. If I want to drag and drop this folder, I can do so, and that will actually physically move it on the desktop. So maybe I don't like it on the upper left, I want to move it to the lower left. I'm going to move over my mouse, press and hold my left mouse button, and while I'm still holding my left mouse button, I'm going to begin to drag down. And Windows is very good about giving you kind of a shaded image so you can see where you're actually dragging to. And when I get that folder to the location I want, I'm now going to release my left mouse button. I just did a drag and drop by dragging the folder from the upper left to the lower left corner. You also can see that this folder is still selected, which is just fine. Just for practice, I'm going to go ahead and drag it back up on my screen. And as you get some more practice, you'll see that dragging and dropping becomes a very simple technique for you to use, in this case for moving a folder to different locations on the desktop. What I want to do now is to show you the difference between a true double click and what the computer perceives to be a click-pause click. I'm going to left-click on the desktop to deselect my folder. Now when I move over the folder, I'm actually going to move over the text itself that says Project Files PC Fundamentals. I'm going to click my mouse once, pause for just half a second, and then click a second time. So here we go. Click, pause, and a click again. What you can see that happened is it now has highlighted the name of my folder. That's the problem that you may have if your double click is too slow for the computer. I'm going to show you how to adjust your double-click speed in the next lesson. But for now, I want to give you just a hint. If you tend to try to double-click on the file name or folder name, you might get into this issue. Right now, it's waiting for you to give it a new name, and that's not what we want to do. So I'm going to click off of it to deselect. One way to avoid that is to double-click fast enough that it doesn't misinterpret it. But here's a kind of a better way. If you always double-click on the icon and not on the text itself, then that will never be an issue because you can only get into that edit mode if you double-click on the text. So let's double-click on the folder itself. Double-clicking actually opens, or launches in this case, a folder. And we'll talk more about folders and files and opening and all of those things in a different chapter. But for now, I want you to notice that there is a file in here called Mouse and Keyboard Skills. I'm going to double-click on this, and again, double-clicking is going to actually open this file. The reason I want you to see this is because I want you to see that the things we've been doing, like clicking and dragging, double-clicking and right-clicking, are different depending on where you're actually doing it. In this case, we're in a text document. If I press and hold my left mouse button and drag across the title, this is not quite dragging and dropping, this is clicking and dragging. And the difference is I didn't move something, but I selected something. So while click and drag and drop are the same physical process with your mouse, by pressing and holding the left mouse button and moving the mouse in a certain direction, they accomplish different things. On the desktop, I did a drag and drop to move the folder, and in a text document, I click and drag to select text. Likewise, I can double-click a word in a text document. When you double-click in a text document, it selects the entire word. Now, I could have done that by clicking and dragging as well, but it was much easier, much more efficient, and much more accurate to just double-click and let the computer select the word for me. Again, double-clicking on a folder or file opens it, double-clicking on a word selects it. Likewise, if I right-click on this word, I see a very different menu than when I right-clicked on my folder. The right-click of my folder gave me a whole list of things that I could do. Right-clicking on a word gives me a shorter list. Basically, it's telling me that my only options for this particular selection are to cut, copy, paste, or work with paragraph and lists. This is because when I double-clicked on the file, it opened the document in WordPad. If your document opened in another program, say Notepad or Microsoft Word, you might see different options, because the right click depends on two things. It depends on what you clicked on and also what program you're in. That's basically what I wanted to show you, just that using the same mousing techniques or the mousing skills may do different things in different locations. Let's move to the upper right side of this window, and you should see a red X. Give that a single left click to close this document. And we can also do a single left click on the red X for the folder to close it down. This will move us back to the desktop. The one last thing I want to do is show you how to use that scroll wheel. You should see on the lower left corner of your screen, next to your Start button, an E for Internet Explorer. If you see that, you can give that a click. If you don't, you can click on your Start button, and at the top of this menu, you might also see the same icon that says Internet Explorer. If you don't see either one of those, try typing Internet. And if Internet Explorer is highlighted at the top, you can either click on it or press Enter. Internet Explorer opens to what is known as the home page, which in my case happens to be the MSN website. I'm obligated to say that Total Training is neither approving, agreeing with, or endorsing anything that is shown on this site. We're only showing it here for illustrative purposes and not the actual content. The reason I want to bring you here is to show you the scroll wheel on the mouse. To use the scroll wheel, you need to have something that takes up more than one screen, and this web page meets those needs. I'm now going to use the scroll wheel, and I'm going to roll it towards me. And what we will see is that in doing so, it actually scrolls the page for me. I'll left-click on the window one time just to make sure that it's active. Then I'll move the wheel towards me, and you can see that it scrolls down. And if I roll the wheel away from me or up on the mouse, it scrolls the page up. This is useful not only for web pages, but also, as I've said before, for long documents. Let's go ahead and close out this window by moving to the upper right corner, clicking on the red X, which gets us back to our desktop. So the mouse, of course, has very fundamental techniques: clicking, clicking and dragging, double-clicking, right-clicking, and using the scroll wheel. Practice those techniques if you need to, because you'll be using them in virtually every place that you work on your computer. The next thing that we can do, though, is we can show you how to adjust the mouse settings. So if it's frustrating because you can't get yourself to double-click fast enough, at least we can make the mouse work for you instead of against you.